Second World War is destruction and death of unprecedented levels. It was truly a global war involving all the great powers. During the time of the war, between 1939 and 1945, it is estimated that up to 85 million fatalities occurred, the majority innocent civilians. It was a period of time that the lines were utterly blurred between the military and civilian involvement. I mean, this total war was so dark, and I still fail to get my head around the massacres, the genocide, the torture, the disease, the bombing, the nuclear obliteration that took place. And I mean, this is only 80 years ago. It's simply mind-blowing. Amongst the millions of historical events through this period of time, one of the most poignant for me is our Aussie soldiers and their fate in Borneo surrounding the Sandakan Death March. During the fall of Singapore, about 300,000 Aussie troops surrendered. Many of these POWs were sent to Changi or to work on the Burma Railway. All hell in their own right. About 1,800 Aussies and about 650 POMs were sent to Borneo. By the time the war ended, 6 Aussie soldiers would fly out of there alive. That's a survival rate of about 0.25%. The diggers that were sent to Borneo were sent there to build an airstrip for the Japs, with limited food, limited water, and no nutrition, ticking many of the boxes against the Geneva Convention. From what I've read, the war crimes and atrocities from the Japs were so bad that the Aussie government deliberately misguided the reasons of their death when notifying their next of kin, sending family members letters saying that their son or brother had died of malaria. I mean, if you're ever having a bad day, think about our young Aussie diggers who in the early 1940s kept in POW camps in the tropics, limited food, no medication, ongoing regular torture, forced labour at gunpoint, your mates dying of dysentery, starvation, malnutrition, tropical ulcers. There's stories of crucifixions, castrations, and even cannibalism. In the heat, all your friends dying around you, I mean, you could smell the death. Burying your mates on a regular basis, hard to fathom. By 1944, Japan was losing the war in the Pacific, and this wasn't good for the POWs in Borneo. There was an order from the top of the Japanese command that no Aussies were to be spared. Our diggers would be used as pack animals to retreat from one coast to the other. Forced to trek 250 k's in the steamy jungle, many barefooted, just wearing rags, humidity 100%, temperature 36 degrees. Those that couldn't keep up were bayoneted or shot or simply left. This is the Sandakan Death March. A dozen soldiers would escape into the jungle, but only 6 would make it out alive. 6. After the war, 1,787 bodies were retrieved in the POW camps or along this trail. I'm really excited in a couple of weeks' time to walk in these footsteps of these Aussie soldiers standing in the dirt in the spot where many took their last breath, so we could live a life free of suppression and with opportunities. I do feel bad for knowing very little about the Sandakan Death March and the stories around it. I don't recall learning about it at school, although I wasn't an A-grade student and maybe I just wasn't paying attention in class that day. But many authors believe it's probably our biggest atrocity against Australian soldiers in any war. So I really look forward to understanding about this. My old man has asked my brother and I to accompany him on the walk from one side of the coast to the other. I truly believe that all of our allied troops never gave up the opportunity of survival. I mean, that fighting spirit has got to burn within us all. I simply can't comprehend what they went through. Being close to home, but so far away, separated from their families, being so young, knowing that's they're going to be their resting place. There's no better motivation than thinking about our effort of our soldiers and our national forces. I do find myself thinking about the war and wars more often these days as you go through your own challenges, your own, and it's something that definitely puts your own situation into perspective. I look forward to telling you more about Borneo as I learn about it myself, understanding, appreciation, and total respect for the Aussie digger. Talk to you soon.